before I start, I'm going to tell you, just be warned, I'm just going to tell you a bunch of stories. I'm a good storyteller. So I think it's appropriate I start by telling you the story how I got here today. So I was here, like Bill said earlier this year, we're speaking, and Mr. Tom Summers, there he is, Mr. Tom Summers got a hold of me afterwards, and he said, hey, would you consider speaking at CBMC? And I said, is that KBMC? Because I'm familiar with the Korean Business Connection meeting, but not CBMC. No, I did not know anything about CBMC, so I said, I'm going to be down here about a month. Can we get together and talk about it? So I met him, and he started telling me about CBMC, and he was telling me about how CBMC was one of the largest chapter in the national organization. And he also said that recently he was talking to the national office, and they had mentioned to him that the Fresno state chapter was becoming too old and too white. So I thought about that later, actually, and I thought, wait, I'm on to him. I'm not that old, and I'm certainly not that white. So I'm on to you. I'm on to you. So if this is a total bust, you can check your quota boxes. Okay? So, thank you. So, in all seriousness, when I asked him, when he was telling me about the organization, he said, would you come and speak? I said, why? Why me? And this is what he said, and I'll never forget it. He said, because when I heard you speak, you had the ability to connect with people. And I thought, that's me. And I long for connection, deep connection. And it just so struck me, I said, yes, absolutely, I'll come and speak. So today I want to share my story with you, my story of trial, pain, journey through pain and acceptance. But all the while I want to talk about God's redemption and joy and courage in my life. And while I'm telling my stories, I hope you can connect and remember your own story, because each one of you have your own story. So let's get started. My story starts in South Korea. So I grew up pretty poor, and I'm going to give you some context what poor means in South Korea back in the 70s. We had a communal living. There were 3 families that lived together. And what I recall is, I was pretty young, but we had an open area and 1 water spigot, and everybody did their washing and so forth there. My mom cooked in this little, I don't know if you call it a kitchen, it was a little room. And what I recall as a child is going in there, my mom had she cooked everything with coal. It was this cylinder-shaped coal, and she put it in the ground and heat it, and that's how she cooked. It also warmed the 1 bedroom that we lived in. We all slept in the same room, and it heated the baseboard. As a kid, I hated going into that room. That was the worst room, because every time I opened that door, the rats would just scurry everywhere. And these weren't like New York rats. These were Korean rats, and they're much bigger. At least they seemed bigger to me since I was a small kid. But I hated going into that room because that's where she did all her meals. Of course, we didn't have any refrigeration, so she bought her meals every day. The other thing I remember is that because there were 3 families living this communal living, we had 1 outhouse. And it was just a hole in the wall, or a hole in the ground, not in the wall, and the ground. And thank God there was a door to that. And it was quite busy. I mean, there was probably 15, 16 people within 3 families, and using an outhouse. The other thing I remember about my childhood in Korea is that we didn't obviously have a place, we didn't have a shower or anything like that, so we went to a community bathhouse about once a week. And so I got my bath that way. The other thing I remember about Korea is my father, or lack thereof. So by the age of 10, I have 2 memories of my dad. And you might be thinking, how could you in 10 years of your life have only 2 memories of your father? But I literally only have 2 memories. So if you can put that picture up. So this is a picture of me and my dad. Kind of chubby. Myself, that is. So the one memory I have with my dad is that one year he took me to the farm. And as a kid, I loved, and what little boy doesn't, catching critters. And we went out to the farm and we caught frogs and all sorts of little animals. And what I also remember from that time is that as we were coming back home, we were on some type of train, then we got in a cab, and my dad was so inebriated. I remember as we pulled to the main street, he didn't have enough money for the cab fare, and the taxi driver just screaming at him. And I took my dad in my arms, and it just was a long walk back to the house. That's the one memory I have of my dad. The second memory I have of my dad is we went to a community swimming pool. And what I remember from that is the fact that I was just with my dad. And what little boy doesn't want to be with their dad? And I just remember being in the presence of my dad, and it was so fulfilling. So, a little context there, but while all this was going on in my life, I never realized I was poor because people around me were a similar living style. There were the few exceptions. For the most part, the concept of being poor was not in my mind. And God also provided my mom, who comes from a legacy, a family of just their faith. And she poured into my sister and I. And I have fond memories of going to church, Bible studies, Sunday school activities, and it was there that God really established in me the foundation of my faith. And when I look at this season in my life, I call it the provision season. God provided everything I needed in preparation for the next season to come. So we fast forward in October 1978, my parents came to my sister and I and said, we're moving to the U.S. I remember thinking to myself, why not? I could count to 10. I don't know why, but I could count to 10. I thought, okay, I can do this. So we left, and everything was new, of course, never been on an airplane and so forth, and we got on that big double-decker, I remember. And somewhere over the Pacific, I had to go to the bathroom. And I walked into the bathroom, and I had a major dilemma. And it's not like a dilemma in the bathroom like you might think. It's a different kind of dilemma. So I walked in, and my dilemma was this. I stood in front of the toilet, and I kind of went like this. I went, how do you use this thing? I had never seen a toilet in my life. It was just the hole in the ground. So after pondering for a little bit, I did what I always did. I just jumped up on the seat and squatted over the hole. It's a toilet hole, but it was that memory I still have. I mean, I don't remember a lot about the traveling over, but that I remember very specifically. When we came to the Boise in 1978, and we landed in Boise because my dad's brother had already immigrated there. I was in 4th grade when we came because I didn't speak any English. They put me in 2nd grade, and I had to get caught up quick, which I did. But you know, back in the 70s in Boise, Idaho, well, first of all, there weren't a lot of Asian kids in Boise, and the term politically correct wasn't really that well thought of. So I learned really quick in the first couple of days of school, my kids weren't laughing with me, they were laughing at me, and they were teasing. And I had this fire that exploded within me, which said, okay, well, game on. You know, I can do this. And I sought out the biggest kid, the same old story, find the biggest kid and knock him out, and you're going to be good. I did that, but I started knocking out every other kid I could find. And that went on for several years in my life. And I had a moment, I think it was a couple of years down the road, I was walking home, and by this time I was still just getting into trouble. And I was walking home, I was at this crossroad at a traffic light, and this other kid came from the other direction. He was in junior high, because I knew the junior high was there, and I was still in grade school. And we kind of met in the corner, and he looked at me. And I remember this very, very vividly. I looked at him and I said, I know what you're thinking. And he's like, what are you talking about, man? I know what you're thinking. So I started to rile him up, rile myself. I'm going to go to town on this guy, right? And then all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, what is wrong with you, man? And it really shook me. I'm like, I don't know. Was there something wrong with me? But it's what he said after that really shook me. He said, why don't you go back to where you came from? I couldn't hit the guy. I didn't know what to do. Because when we moved here, my parents were so bent on my sister and I getting acclimated and assimilated quicker. She had us just Americanized, which means we did not hang out with Korean kids. So after a couple of years, I felt as American as anyone. You know, I mean, inside I felt like, you know, I'm an American. You know, kind of like a lemon Oreo cookie, you know, yellow on the outside but white on the inside. I was white. I mean, for me, I was white. I was white as white. And when he said that, I'm like, I'm a total misfit. I can't go back here. Where do I go here? And it was really hard. That was the point when I said to myself, okay, I can't beat up everybody. So I remember I said to myself, I'll show them. I'll show them. And I'm going to come back to the them, because the them factor has played out in my life for a very, very long time. So I did. I started to compete in everything else besides fighting. So give you some of my credentials. Student body president, played every sport, hung out with the right kids. It was all about performance. I said, if I can't beat them up, then I'll beat them at everything else I could do. And just because I'm stature-wise a little bit shorter, everything I said to myself was, what I lack in physical attributes or anything else, or finance or anything, I will make it up in determination. And Bill's right, because he's German, he's competitive. Koreans, Germans, they're pretty competitive. So I was competitive, and I was going to beat them at their own game. And I was doing it. I didn't have to throw any more fists. I was beating them at their own game. But during this time, about 7th grade, I got exposed to alcohol in the sense that I started drinking. And it played out throughout my high school. To this day, when I think about God's one twist of faith, and my life would have looked totally different. How many times I got behind the wheel of a car, driving completely drunk. Not only that, but having people in my car. And alcohol was my Achilles. And so many opportunities where my life could have looked so different. This is what I would categorize as my season of protection. So in Korea, God provided for me. And in this season throughout high school, God was my protector. So I finished high school almost with a 4.0. And I go to Boise State. And yes, we have a blue field. And yes, the geese do land on it. And we have 3 Fiesta Bowl titles. But this is Fresno, I get that. So what is it? Was it orange or red? Red, okay. So I'll be red for the next couple of hours, but then I'm back to blue, okay? So my college career started like this. When I got to college, I had the same mentality. I just need to get through this because I'm going to go make a lot of money. I'm going to compete, and I'm going to show them, okay? And I'm going to get through this so I can get to what I'm good at. My first semester in college, when I showed up and they were saying, hey, you got to take all these, I was a business major, they said, you got to take intro to this, intro to that. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I have to take this, stuff that's not it's useless. And they said, yeah, you got to take it. So I went, okay, how do I get out of this? Because I needed to work. So I started working full time. And so I remember going to Intro to Psychology. And it's a lecture hall, right? It's like 200 people or whatever, and the professor's going through the whole syllabus. And I remember going, I can't take it anymore. I go like this. And he goes, yes, you? And I said, will the test be multiple choice? And he goes, yes. And I said, thank you. I showed up the only time I showed up was for tests. I figured I could wing it. Always go with C if you can't figure it out. C's your good percentage. So I hope there aren't any students here, but first semester at Boise State, 2.0, straight C. Straight C. Yeah, I just wanted to get through. So my whole goal was getting there so I could make money. And when I was a sophomore, it took a little turn because a couple of guys from Campus Crusade for Christ, and I'm sure most of you guys have heard that organization, they got a hold of me, and they just ignited the fire for me, what my mom had built in Korea. And I just came in love with the ability to serve Christ on campus. So that was a big part of my life. All the while this is going on, I'm thinking, okay, I've got to get through this to get to business. And I was working at a health club, and my friend and I, we decided we're going to start our own company. So we came up with a brand. I mean, we're so young, we don't have any money, of course, and we said we're going to come up with a brand, because brand is something you own. And Bill knows about this as well, the Wawona brand. So we've been stalking these entrepreneurs at the health club, trying to see which one we can get to work to invest in our company. So we picked one, and his name was Randy, and we went up there and we presented the whole case to him. And I remember he looked at us and he goes, I like it. How much do you need? $10,000, sir. And he said, great, I'll put it up. I get 51%. And I remember, it's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rule. And we looked at each other and said, no way, man. This is our idea. And interestingly enough, he looked at us and he said, well, I got a proposition for you two. He said, I own several companies, but I just bought another company, and it's called Pretzel Time. And this is the era when all the soft-baked pretzels were coming out on the market in the malls. And he said, I just bought this franchise. I have 3 stores. I have one here in Boise, one in Utah, and one in Washington, and we're really going to build this thing. I'd like you guys to come and work for us. Well, the story goes, Justin turned it down, and I turned it down. And I said, no, that's not what I'm going to do after what I've gone through. He's like, I'll tell you what, why don't you go to the mall, taste one, and you tell me afterwards. I drove to the mall and ate that thing, and I was sold. I mean, it was soft, it was drenched in butter, has salt. I mean, what more could you ask for? And I thought, this thing is going to sell itself. So I went to him and I said, okay, Randy, I'll do this. Just let me finish my school. And he said, yeah, that's great, let's do it. So I joined the company, and fast forward, 3 years later, we had 123 stores in 23 states. Yeah. We became what they call the master franchisee. We owned half the country, and we were rocking it, just rocking it. Now I'm going to do a little time lapse. I'm going to go back because this has relevance to where I'm going forward. So I want to go back actually to October when we landed in Boise. Early November, it was before Thanksgiving. Our first house was a trailer. We lived in a trailer court, a little tiny trailer court. All the trailers had a little driveway. And that year, early November, we got our first snowfall. I mean, it was a heavy, heavy snowfall. So, wait, I'm in Fresno, right? So snow, I can't assume. Snow is this white, cold, well, white like most of you guys out here. So, but it's this heavy stuff. It's really cold, and you got to shovel it. So my dad says, he looks at me and he goes, hey, why don't you go shovel the driveway? And I said, okay. So I went out and shoveled the driveway, and it took all the 10, 15 minutes. And I remember, I'm like, okay. I looked at the trailer next to our house, and I knocked on that door, and this guy opened the door, and I can still picture his face. And I said, sir, in my broken English, I've been to the U.S. for about 3 weeks or so. I said, can I shovel your driveway? And he said, yeah, sure, buddy. He goes, how much? And it then dawned on me that, we're going to have this dialogue. I got to tell him. It didn't even, so I said the first thing that came to my mind. I said, $2? And he goes, great. So I shoveled this driveway, went back. He gave me my $2. And as I was walking from that trailer to the next trailer, something registered in my head. And I knocked on the door. It was a lady this time. And she opened the door, and I said, can I shovel your driveway? And she goes, how much? And I said, whatever you want to pay me. And I remember finishing it. To this day, I don't remember what she paid me, but it was more than $2. It was more than $2. It was innate. I realized then, and all throughout my life and my career, God has given each one of us a specific talent. And he gave me the ability to think and process and ask questions. So let's fast forward back to the pretzel time. So we built this gargantuan business. And after we built this massive enterprise, it came to a halt because we had to stop building. We needed to work on operation. So Randy, the original owner, said to me, he goes, Gary, what would you like to do? I said, well, I like marketing. Let me do the marketing part. So I was working with all the mall managers, but it was so boring. So I said, I'm going to do something else. So I picked up the phone and called the general manager of Marriott over at Boise State. They handle all the food concessions. And his name was Bruce. I said, Bruce, after giving the intro, I said, hey, have you heard of Pretzel Time? He goes, are you kidding me? The only reason I go to the mall is to get a pretzel. My wife drags me, and I know as long as I get a pretzel, I'm good. I'm like, bingo, we got it. So I went down there, and I said, listen, let's do this. So we started working on a deal, and we said, let's build a Pretzel Time store on campus. And he said, let's do it in the basketball stadium. We got basketball, we got concerts, and so forth. But I had a dilemma, because I'm just winging this thing, right? I'm just making things up as I go. And I said to him, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to do transaction. Since we're a franchisee, we pay the franchisor a royalty. So we're sub-franchising. And I realized if I charge them a sub-franchising royalty, it's small. And I went, I got to be able to make more money on this thing. So our business, the way it worked was we had to buy the proprietary secret ingredient flour for these pretzels, secret ingredient, right? And the franchisor sold it to the local distributor for all the stores and all the states, and the stores had to buy it. And it was $2.80 a bag. It's an 8-pound bag of flour, and it yielded 40 pretzels. So you can see why we're making so much money, right? 40 pretzels, $2.80 a bag. And so I said to Bruce, I said, Bruce, I got an idea. Let's keep this very simple. We don't have to audit your books or anything else. I said, why don't we just sell you the flour, and you just order it through me, and I'll sell you the flour. And he said, how much? And I'll tell you what, I had that moment back to being 10 years old at that second trailer. And I went like this. I said, how much do you want to retail it for at your stadium? Always answer a question with a question. That's what Jesus used to do, right? Because I knew in my mind, I said, at the mall, we retail this thing for about $1.29 to $1.49, depending what state you were in. But I knew we were going to get a lot more, but I want him to tell me what he's going to retail it for. He said something like, I think I can get $1.99 or more. And I did a quick math in my head, and I don't know how I came up with this, but I said to him, $16.80 a bag. Okay, so for all you accountants and math wizards, buy it at $2.80, sell it at $16.80. Bill's going to raise my price. I know he is. So just plug your ears. I don't know the percentage, but it was a lot. The GM was just ridiculous. But he could do it because he's going to retail at a much higher price. So we put the whole deal together, and it was a smashing success. I remember I worked with our construction department. We built this beautiful store in the Taco Bell arena, which is still there today. And people were coming all the way from the other side of the stadium to get a pretzel. So not only were we making good margin, we were getting exposure for our store in the city. And it was just phenomenal. So it didn't stop there. I started selling the napkin, the cups, anything with the logo, with a huge margin. But it was a great model, but it's great GM percentage, but it was still one operation. So I called Bruce one day and I said, give me a lead. And he goes, call my buddy down at Arizona State University. So I did. And he goes, come on down. So I went and met with him, and he goes, hey, I want to fast track this thing, but I want it in my football stadium, the Sun Devil Stadium. He said, because this year we have the National Tostitos Fiesta Bowl Championship here at my stadium, and Super Bowl 30 is here. So he said, I want you to have this done. So we put the whole thing together. We built this great store in the football stadium, and then we figured out how to do a mobile cart so we can make it there and have it throughout the stadium. Same kind of margin. We have 5 stores in Arizona, so it was great exposure. And we did it. Super Bowl 30, Dallas Cowboys, my team. Where's Randy White? Randy White with Dallas Cowboys. There he is, sorry. It's an inside joke between me and Randy. Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, Florida Gators, Nebraska Cornhuskers that year. Huge exposure. I took that same concept and took it to amusement parks, same scenario. We're doing all this with the Department of One, that's me, and I'm just winging it. I had my fair share of making mistakes, but we were literally printing money. And I remember my owner, Randy, came to me and said, he goes, how far can you take this? I go, as far as we can go. And then the franchisor started getting a little jealous of what we were doing. So this goes on, and while this is going on, something happens within my heart. I feel this total emptiness, and I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I guess you can call it I was on the top of the world, doing my thing, still in my early 20s, and I feel this empty void in my heart. And one day, I went, okay, I know. Okay, God, I get it. I'll quit, and I'm going to go become a missionary. Then I'll know. So I called my friends at Boise State with Campus Crusade, and I said, I want to join staff. And I'm going to go raise support, and I want to be a missionary. They said, great, you'll be awesome. Come on down. So I'm ready to do this. And just as fast as it came, one night I'm sitting in my room. I didn't hear something audibly, but might as well have been, because this is what I heard. I just wanted to see if you do it. Now that I know you would, is that where I would have for you? And I went, okay, Lord, I get it. It was that clear. As clear as the first time I felt it, as clear as him saying, no, that's not what I want you to do. So I kept working, and I waited. I can't recall how long it took, but shortly after that, I went to a Campus Crusade event, and there was a speaker, and he had left his former company to start a new company because he was driven by his faith to start a Christian company. And he and I met, and he said, listen, I just started this with nothing. He said he had $5,000 in working capital. And he said, I started this company. I want you to come and work for me. You're the guy. You're the guy. He goes, I have nothing to offer. As a matter of fact, he goes, he slid a piece of paper. He goes, this is what I can offer the pay. He goes, this is going on faith. And I remember looking at it going, gosh, that's like not even half what I was making. But then I knew it was like God was saying, okay, good, we're ready. This is what you're going to do. So I went in, and I closed the door. I remember walking into Randy's office and closed the door, and he looked at me and goes, why are you closing the door? You never do that. And I said, I'm leaving. And he goes, why? I remember he looked at me and goes, why? Why would you leave? And he goes, you have another job? And I said, yeah. He goes, is it more money? I'm like, no. No, far from it. But he knew that that the company couldn't provide. He knew about my faith. So I joined the company, and we started with nothing. And in 12 years, we grew the company from 0 to about $33 million in revenue, and we built a brand. The idea of my friend Justin in college of building a brand was still in my mind, and we built a brand in the food business, and the brand nobody can take away. We decided we're not going to manufacturing. We're not good manufacturers. We're good marketers. So we decided we're going to build a brand and have other people make food for us. You'd be surprised how many things that you buy in the grocery stores, that branded company, they don't make that. They have somebody else make it because they've done their research and they've put their money in the marketing and not the manufacturing. So at this time, the company's really growing. I'm about 27, and I get my second emptiness. I was like, what is this thing with that empty heaviness, God? And it was like, that was the season when all my friends were getting married. And I'm like, Lord, I'm ready to get married. I'll bring me a bride. And so all my life, I've been cutting deals. And in a way, I've been cutting deal with God. So I went to the Lord and I said this, I promise to, until you bring me a bride, I will not date, I will not have any physical contact, I will wait. But could you do me a favor and let me get married before I'm 30? Because in my mind, once I turn 30, I'll be 30, he's in his 30s, in my 20s still. So a couple of years later, I'd meet this beautiful, amazing woman through Campus Crusade and her faith. And when I got married, I was 29 and a half. So God does deliver. I think he's got a good sense of humor, too. So the business continues to grow, and we get to a point about 10 years in, the owner's pretty much checked out. He's doing other things. I'm running the company, but he hasn't given me full control of the company. And I remember at that time, I went back to the Lord and I said, Lord, I have a desire to be the CEO or president of the company. And then that will do it. And then I will feel fulfilled. Then I'll show them. I'll show them because I'll be their boss and so forth. And in 2007, we engaged with a private equity group. And they come in. We do our due diligence. We end up selling the company. And they tell the owner, hey, here's your money. Have a nice life. Sign a non-compete. And they said, Gary, you're our golden child because you're going to make us a lot of gold. They said, hey, these are private equity Wall Street guys. Hey, we own a couple of food companies in our portfolio, and we'd like to merge this into your company, and we're going to have you run the whole thing, and we're going to name you president and CEO in January 2008. And I was 39 and a half. So God continues to do this half thing. I don't know why, but it's just like, I asked for it, and it delivered. And so I took over. And it's a little bit like snow shoveling, like my pretzel days. I'm winging it most of the time, totally winging it. But all the while, I know that I have an innate talent that God's given me, and I'm refining it as I go. And it's the humility part that is the foundational part that I believe that makes business successful. So when they handed the baton to me and they merged in a couple of the companies, we were about $45 million. I'm going to fast forward 7 years with Flagship Food Group. At the end of 2015, we grew the business to $300 million a year in sales. We had global operation in Europe. We're buying and selling companies. And I learned more about Wall Street, dealing with the names like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, you name it. Just learning, and I'm just absorbing it. And it is filling my soul, but also at the same time, I'm still missing something. Because I thought, this is it. I've arrived. All the years of my hard working finally caught up with me. My marriage had been struggling. And in 2016, my wife of 18 years filed for divorce. She had been addicted to prescription meds and alcohol. And with 3 kids, she said, I'm out of here. And it started my next season in life, which is the season I'm in now. And I saw my dreams shatter right before me. All the things that I thought I had worked for, this was it. This was the pinnacle of what I was supposed to do, and I was obedient. And shattered before my eyes. And even worse, watching my boys falling apart in my arms. And I remember my oldest son said to me, he's 15, he said, "Dad, why?" I said, "Why?" And the thought that came to me was, I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that we're temporal. We're all going to leave planet Earth someday. And we can only see through temporal eyes. But God, he sees through eternal eyes. So while your pain and my pain, it feels like eternity, it's just a passing moment. That seemed to be sufficient for him. I remember walking away into my room and going, it's not sufficient for me. And I had my moments of yelling at God, waving my fist at God, recanting the misfit factor, and you know, statistically speaking, half of you should know what I'm talking about, you know? And then in March of this year, I had something happen. I was at a convention in San Diego, and it's one of these conventions where you do meeting after meeting. I had 55 meetings in 3 days. I was just dead tired. And I remember I was leaving the hotel, the taxi driver came in, and it was one of those taxi drivers. I mean, he was talking before he even pulled out of the parking lot. And let me describe him to you a little bit. He was an older gentleman, and he was an African-American and kind of a heavier set gentleman. And he started to proceed to tell me his life story, which I love stories. And he told me the story. He goes, I was 22, left Florida, hitchhiked all the way to California, told me about the businesses he owned and failure and pain. His daughter's at MIT, and I'm like, okay, he got my attention. I'm like, sure. So I started engaging in this conversation with him. And we're talking about pain, and I was just listening to him. And as we pulled up to the curb, he said something that left such an indelible impression in my life. And I'm gonna say this a little bit with his accent and his kind of personality, okay? So don't laugh too hard. He said, if you want to be a cake, you gotta get in the oven. If you don't go in the oven, you ain't nothing but batter in a bowl. How'd I do? Is that okay? And I was so shocked. I remember sitting there and I said, sir, would you say that one more time? He said, if you want to be a cake, you got to get in the oven. Because if you don't, you're nothing but batter in a bowl. I thanked him. I got out of the cab. Before I even walked into the terminal, I broke down in tears. Because I said, it's not an oven, it's a furnace. And the furnace has got my name on it. It's my own personal furnace that God made. And he said, crank it up. Crank it up. And he said, I'm not going to talk you into it. I'm not going to push you in. But you want to become a godly man, you want to follow me, you walk into that furnace, and I will make sure you come out refined. I don't know, maybe it was an angel. But I'm in my furnace. And I like to think, like that 10-year-old kid who moved here, I didn't have to be pushed in. I gladly walk in. Recently, I was listening to a song. This is just a week ago. And it just really captivated me. It's a song called Just Be Held. And I'm just going to read you a few lyrics. It said, hold it all together. Everybody needs you to be strong. But life hits you out of nowhere and barely leaves you holding on. And when you're tired of fighting, chained by your control, there's freedom in surrender. So lay it down and let it go. So when you're on your knees and answer seems so far away, you're not alone. Stop holding on and just be held. Your world's not falling apart. It's falling into place. I'm on the throne. Stop holding on and just be held. Just be held. He said, your world's not falling apart. It's falling into place. I remember at the early stage when she left the house, I would crawl, literally crawl in my room, wondering, how am I going to make it through the next minute? And seeing my life shatter before my eyes. But what I realized is all falling into place. So, this season in life is my season of God's redemption. It's a redemptive story. So, I would ask you the same. Where is your story of God's provision, His protection, His direction, and your redemptive story? Because we all have it. And I encourage you to write it down, because you'll forget. Because you will have an opportunity to share with people that God puts into your life. Thank you for your time.